Hey, welcome everybody to our Live with John Howler. We're going to have a really, in the words of, what was that guy's name, John? Ed Sullivan? We're going to really get shoe. How do you say
really
that?
big shoe.
Really big shoe today. So let's get rolling. John, welcome. Good to see you.
Yep.
By the way,
Good to see you.
I was at a pre-trib conference over the last several days, and there's a whole lot of people there that like you in the pre-trib world. I was like, wow, this is really amazing. That's pretty cool.
My plan is working.
They all believe their plan is working for you, too. For them, too.
I know, they think they're going to convert me.
They think you're going to get you over to the light, the side of light. That's what we're all convinced. So,
yeah.
Hey, so are you ready? I want to ask you some questions. We're going to take questions. Everybody, start sending in your questions. Make sure you put the word question in all caps. And we're going to roll because I am, with this, John, I'm thinking, okay, you had an interview with Jonathan Spire that you recently did. I want to ask you about that. You also had Taro Tekrib and a couple of other people. You've done a few more roundtables since I've been on there. But I want to start here first because there's so many things going on. I'm watching what's going on with the court ruling with Trump. And now you have all kinds of people. You're an attorney. I mean, I'm looking at this. Supreme Court says, no, Trump has to appear on all ballots.
No,
just
they
real
said
quick.
that 9-0.
9-0.
The court voted 9-0.
9-0. Imagine that. And boy, are people
and now
so
all the lunatics on the left, like Jamie Raskin from Maryland, and I'm pretty sure that your favorite, your native son, Adam Schiff, they're all going to try to introduce legislation to say that, well, Trump really did engage in an insurrection. But you can't do that after the fact. There's a thing in the constitutional law called ex post facto. You can't see somebody do an act and then go make up a law that says, okay, this violates the law. That's not permitted. But whether it's legal or not doesn't matter to these lunatics on the left. Okay. So, and it's crazy. It's just insane. And so the Supreme Court said, and so all these law professors who came up with this ridiculous, may I say, stupid, ridiculous, moronic theory about the 14th Amendment and the insurrection clause, they're all over they're having meltdowns on it's MSNBC. It's kind of fun to watch in a way, but so Trump will remain on the ballots.
I just find it fascinating how many people are so upset about it. So many interesting things are going on. I'm going to save some for my midweek update. But did you hear yet about this big tech disaster today, Super Tuesday? Here it is, Super Tuesday, right? Did you hear about it?
Well, I was at a meeting with a friend who's mentioned to you he's going to be going on a mission in Israel for 5 years. And I think he thinks he's going to. And I came out and somebody sent me an email, said, hey, Facebook is down. So I didn't even know. I was away from it for 3 hours. So my life didn't melt down. Is that the one you're talking about, Facebook and Instagram?
So Facebook, I even got an email from somebody in Canada.
That's where I got one from. Maybe the same person.
Yep. And then Pookie had sent in this question. What are your thoughts on this? Here it is, Super Tuesday. But we do have, let's see. I got to skip that question. So I'll have to go to another one. But so let's go here. I really want to get all nations gathering against Israel.
Yeah.
Well, you just did an update on it.
You know, Tom, I've been, so I probably shouldn't send this to you because I don't know if I want to refer somebody to something else that may not be consistent with what you talk about. But you have me on, which I'm sort of inconsistent with everything you talk about anyway. If that's the test. But I've been looking at a lot of things about the nations gathered together against Israel. So I'm just seeing sort of different things right now as I'm kind of unpacking some of these scriptures. You know, one of the things I don't want to get stuck in is that, well, and I'm not saying this as a slam to anybody out there. I read Late Great Planet Earth in 1969, and I'm sticking with it because I don't know that that's the way. In those days, that's what it looked like. Some of the things that Hal Lindsey wrote about in that book. But now I think we live at a different time, and I think we need to be. I've often said this: make sure that all your prophecy charts and maps and everything are in PowerPoint or something that you can edit easily on the fly, because things may change very rapidly overnight. And so I've been looking at some different things, some different thoughts that people have. So I saw your thing with Bill Salas yesterday, and you talked about Psalm 83. Now, there are some people teaching, and this is not just one person, some people suggesting that the 10 nations may actually be the 10 nations identified in Psalm 83, which raises some interesting implications because they seem to be at peace with Israel, but it's a ruse. So we have Saudi Arabia appears to be on the verge. We have countries around Israel. I think Jordan is excluded. That's another interesting thing going on with the water situation there. As you know, I don't know if you ever talked to Joel Kramer about it. He lives, well, last time I talked to him, he lived in Amman, Jordan. He gets his cistern filled once a month.
Yeah.
And if the water goes out, they don't have any water at their house till it's filled up. But Jordan gets about twice as much water from Israel right now as Israel's required to under their treaty from 1994, or they entered into a treaty about water. Israel's been giving them twice the amount. The Jordan is bone dry. Jordan is the most water-challenged country on the planet. And they're relying on Israel, yet they're fighting them over the Temple Mount. And so I'm just saying is that water renewal agreement is up for renewal this fall. What's going to happen, and how's that going to implicate and affect Bible prophecy and the nations gathered together against Israel? And what is it that costs Jordan, Edom, Moab, and the greater part of Ammon, which is most of Jordan, to be peeled away in this Daniel 11 thing? How does that come about? Mm-hmm. So that's another factor. But then I don't think the Ammon, Jordan, and Ammon, Moab, and Edom are part of this 10-nation thing in Psalm 83. But some people think that this is the 10-nation kingdom that's going to rise up in the end. And I've heard a number of people teaching this recently. So again, it's one of these things I kind of consider. And I do think we're at the verge of things that things are changing so rapidly that we're going to get to a place where, okay, that's how that's going to work out. It's like, and I don't know if we talked about this last week, the eclipse. I talked about it with somebody.
I do know I talked about it last week. I think you and I briefly got into it, and then I got into it with Pete Garcia. That's right. And then I said I'm going to ask Pete, and Pete and I went into it quite a bit.
So, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Well, I think we'll know after. And I live in the path of totality, by the way. So, assuming that it's not cloudy in Ohio like it is today, which is very common around here. But so what you're seeing is, so could these nations in the Abraham Accords be part of the nations that are gathered together against Israel in the end times? And I think, yeah, that's a possibility. We see a lot of things going on with Russia, with Persia, the leaders of the terrorist organizations, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority, at least representatives of them, were in Moscow last week for a meeting. And Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, is out there saying, hey, we need to help these guys get unified.
So I look at all these things,
It's
John.
crazy.
Hey, we're getting a ton of questions in, so I'm going to have to go here in just a second. But with everything that you said, we think of Daniel chapter 12, and the way Daniel chapter 12 reads, it leads me to believe the closer we get to Christ's second coming, the more clarity we're going to have on the prophecies regarding the second coming of Christ. And I really think that's what you are describing. And right or wrong, we're going to be making our adjustments in certain things. We do know there's a mark of the beast that's coming. We do know an antichrist. We do know a false prophet. We do know there's going to be 10 kings. We know that Jerusalem becomes the epicenter. So there's certain things we know beyond that are very clear, but how they come about is going to be we're going to have more clarity on that, and I agree. So I have several questions to ask you because a bunch of them kept on coming in. So the first one is, I forget who asked it, but it was regarding a Jubilee year, and I want to ask you, do you think we're in a Jubilee year? It was Jeff the Man.
I've seen a lot of people make that argument, so I can't say yes or no.
Okay, I kind of feel the same way. You want to go to the next question?
No, well, by the way, my 49th anniversary is coming up in a few weeks. And so I'm entering a Jubilee year of my marriage, so I'm really looking forward to that, all that forgiveness and stuff coming my way.
That is great. I love that. So I would, I love it. So I'm in the same camp as John is. I see a lot of different things on it. It's kind of like the eclipse. I think we both settled this place last week. We'll see how it goes. Pete Garcia almost made me a believer in it. It is interesting with this eclipse that's coming through. I read this morning that there's 7 different cities named Nineveh that the eclipse is going through. I didn't look that up myself, but Pete
it is true. And I think there's only but before it goes through all the Ninevehs, it goes through, I think, the only place in the country named Rapture.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that is crazy. So
Rapture Township.
Pete was pointing out all these different cities with all these biblical names. I'm going, this is crazy. In Utah, I would expect these certain names, but right in the path of the eclipse, I don't know. It is just really weird. I will admit that. All right. Somebody wants me to ask you about Melchizedek. I saw them at the conference. I said, I tell you what, when I have John, I'm going to ask him his opinion on Melchizedek. But before we get there, here's another question for you. This is from Cindy on the website. And Cindy's question is regarding Zechariah chapter 12, verses 10 through 14, the passage we all know, where the Bible says, I will pour on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look upon me whom they pierced. Yes, so they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for for a firstborn. And then it goes on and says, that in that day there shall be great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadad and Rimmon and the plain of Megiddo, and the land shall mourn, every family by itself, the family of the house of David by itself, their wives, and so forth, and Nathan, the family of the house of Levi by itself, and so forth, all the families that remain, every family by itself, and their wives by themselves. Now, Cindy asked, during this mourning period, will it be literally all or all unblinded to truth, so have a choice to accept truth? I look at, when do you see Zechariah chapter 12 being fulfilled?
Well, the thing that I see, and I heard Bill Salas yesterday, he thinks Zechariah 12 is different from Zechariah 14. And I can't dispute that off the top of my head, but I do know in 10, it says, then they will look on me whom they pierced. And it's very interesting. I was listening to a rabbi last night teach. This is an Orthodox rabbi, so he's citing the Talmud and the Sanhedrin and all these different things and oral traditions. But it's very fascinating because he got to this verse, and when he was reading from this verse, he was saying, and then we will look on the God who's going to become the one God over everyone. That's not what the verse says.
So he couldn't read it, in other words, for what it actually says.
He was paraphrasing it on the fly.
That's totally paraphrasing.
I'll have to send you the video. But other things he made were kind of interesting, like, for example, that Russia, by the way, do you know what Vladimir Putin's birthday is?
Yeah, you sent it to me, October 7th.
October 7th.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's just one of those coincidences that we're not allowed to talk about.
There's a lot of weird coincidences happening right now.
But he was making the point that the rabbi tradition, remember, Russia and Persia used to be at war. In the early 1800s, there was a massive war, and Russia invaded. They were expanding the Russian Empire at the time, and they invaded Persia. I can't remember the name of the war. There was a big famous treaty, but now Russia and Persia are acting in concert. So you have Russia acting with Hamas and the Palestinian people who oppose they're the ones who created the Palestinian Liberation Organization back in 1964. They were the ones who trained Yasser Arafat, okay, on causing chaos. And everybody forgets that. And it's not the Soviet Union now, it's Russia, but same people. I mean, Putin was at least a KGB agent for a while.
And it was a KGB, operation, wasn't it?
Yeah. But he was saying that in the tradition of some rabbis, as they were teaching a couple hundred years ago, that there would become this reconciliation between Russia and Persia, and that Russia, the same spirit behind Iran that we see identified in Daniel chapter 10, is the same one behind Russia. And that's kind of interesting. So I'm just sort of looking at these things, and I'm sort of taking bits and pieces, and I'm sort of trying to formulate a more cohesive thing. And I know we're doing a conference early in September, someplace in the Midwest, I think. And I'm probably going to focus one of my talks on that. And I'll certainly be talking about that in my updates. I'm just telling you, Tom, the way these things are all coming together, it's very simple and very complex all at the same time. And it's hard to sort it out because it's changing every day. But Russia and Iran have really become a lot closer over the past years. And Putin gave a State of the Nation speech last week, by the way, for a guy who's supposedly ill. Now, people say, oh, that's just an AI-generated guy. Okay, if you want to believe that, go ahead. I think it was a real guy standing there for almost 3 hours speaking. You think my updates are long? Putin gets up there for 3-4 hours. And frankly, I never see him leave to go to the bathroom, which at his age, 71 or 72, pretty amazing. Yeah, you would think it almost is. I think he's 71. So I'm just saying is that, and then this rabbi was also talking about the Third Rome, which raises a whole lot of issues, which we really can't get into here, that Moscow was the Third Rome. And that's and this is what some Jewish rabbis have been teaching over the last 200-300 years. Now, I don't know whether they're right, okay, but I think we can't ignore that voice.
Very interesting. Very much so. I'd like to ask you about the Third Rome, but if we get enough time. So do you have any thoughts on who Melchizedek was? Jerry Nall, I met him at the conference over the weekend, and I promised him I would ask John Haller. And I said, was he a Christophany or was he a man? And then, I've seen it. I'll see it in person next week. The altar that I think it's Eli Shukron has termed is the altar of Melchizedek, or the temple of Melchizedek.
It's down there in the city
about that, the city of David.
The area of the city of David. Yeah, and the guy and I don't know if that's what you're talking about, the guy from Israel, my channel, who does a lot of great videos.
His are fantastic.
He did a great video on it. Yeah. So I kind of go back and forth. For a long time, I thought, yeah, he's a Christophany. It's an appearance of Christ in the Old Testament, because it's kind of weird that, Abraham comes all the way from Ur of the Chaldees, which is in modern day Iraq. By the way, I don't think it's southern Iraq. I think it's probably northern Iraq that he came from, but be that as it may. And he comes to Jerusalem and he gives, an offering to this priest that's there. And then in Hebrews, Paul goes in, whoever wrote Hebrews goes into a long dissertation about Melchizedek, that Jesus was the fulfillment of Melchizedek. So the question is, was it a Christophany or was it not? And I've kind of gone both ways in my teaching career. I've said both things. Well, so maybe I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. What do you think it is?
Okay, that's funny, because that's the exact answer I told him that when we were at the conference. I said, look, I've gone back and forth on this, and I said, but I will ask John Haller, because I'm curious as to what his opinion is. So yours is the same as mine. I've gone back and forth on it. I mean, some of the, I mean, you have a tithe being paid. You have certain things that make me think this is appearance of Christ in the Old Testament. However, there's other chapters. You get to, where is it, Hebrews? You get to other things. Okay, yeah. Is it or is it not? So let's leave it there, because you and I have the same opinion, and maybe we should do a little bit more in depth on that and really get to it. But I have two more questions to ask you.
So, but let me just fill this in. So, sort of a Christophany that I think we both agree that's a Christophany was the appearance of the angel of the Lord before the final battle of Jericho.
Oh yes,
definitely. And by the way, the book of Joshua is pretty. I mean, when you have the 777s and things at the end, it's pretty much a pattern for it really fits with the pattern of Revelation, and that raises a whole host of issues. But Jacob encounters this guy. Mm-hmm. No, wait, that's not. I'm
Joshua.
Yeah, Jacob. I mean Joshua, and he accepts worship, which means it's not an angel. Angels would reject worship and say no. But so I'm pretty sure that was a Christophany. That was an appearance of the pre-incarnate Christ.
And then also you do have Jacob too, when he wrestles all night with the commander of wasn't it with the commander of the Lord's army who touched him on his hip and gave him a whip? So you have both.
And that's, by the way, Joel Kramer has a great video on that play where that happened over in Jordan.
Yeah. So wait.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking forward to going there. We get to go to Bethel.
But you're going to Bethel, which is where the dream took place.
With Roddy, where the dream took place with Jacob, and I'll be able to talk about Jacob wrestling with the Lord. So Joshua was the commander of the Lord's army, and Joshua, I believe it's Joshua who said, "Are you with me or are you with them?"
Right.
It doesn't get that, and Jacob's the one who gets touched in the hip. But they were both, I believe, Christophanies, appearances of
Absolutely.
Jesus in the Old. Okay, one of the questions disappeared, and I wanted to ask you about it. So here it is. Oh, okay. I'm going to get to Petra here in just a second. I'm going to ask you about that. Somebody has a question on it. But Paula from YouTube, Paula JB says, this is, I mean, we don't know for sure yet, but it's coming in just a few weeks. Will the red heifer be sacrificed this Passover? What do you think?
I think there's a good chance that it will be. I saw somebody on YouTube runs a pretty good Facebook group, but he's not big on Bible prophecy. And he's like, "Oh, all you pre-tribbers and eschatology people, you're trying to bring about the end times when millions of people are still dying and going to hell." And I'm like, look, I don't know any Christian who's making the decision to sacrifice the red heifer, and I don't think it's improper for us to report on that this is happening. So they have them. They got them from Rockwall, Texas. I hear that 3 of them are still kosher.
Yeah, three still are. In fact, I think the 4th one, I just saw Mondo the other day. I think the 4th one is questionable, but 3, and it's coming up soon. The thing is,
I think they're going to do it.
If I'm pretty confident if one is still qualifies, it's going to happen. And
now, by the way, when you see this happen, what you're going to see is all the animal cruelty people are going to, oh, look, they're sacrificing animals. That's so cruel to animals. Let me tell you a story. The first time I went to Israel, we went to Jordan first, and it was an Islamic high holy day. This was I can't remember the name of it. It's one of the Muslim festivals. And we fly all night. We spend time in Rome, change planes in Rome. We get there. I mean, we're dead tired. We've been up 28 hours, and we're on our way to the hotel. And our hotel overlooked the royal palace across a field of King at the time, King Hussein. And as we're driving in all over Amman, and Amman is a pretty big, I don't know if you've been there. It's a big city. It's a couple million people, and they don't have, I think the hotel we're in was 12 stories, and it's the tallest building in Amman, Jordan at the time. They're sacrificing sheep all over the place. I've never seen it happen before. Okay. I saw a cow once at a farm, but I'm telling you, there's blood everywhere. Nobody protests that that's cruelty to animals, is my point.
Yeah.
The hypocrisy in this world, anything the Jews do, that's bad.
Yeah.
So I personally, I think there's a good chance that it'll happen, but the Israeli authorities are going to try to shut it down because they know that this is going to be it's a powder keg over there right now.
Yes, it is.
And I do think that war in the North I just think it's inevitable. I interviewed Jonathan Spire for the Middle East Forum last week. You should go listen to that. He's a phenomenally articulate, intelligent analyst. He spent a lot of time in Syria. He understands the players. And he just said, listen, the question is when we have to do this, because we cannot live the way we are. The economy went down 20% in a quarter in Israel. The tax situation is fairly, they need revenue. And they have 100,000 people in the South and 100,000 people in the North that don't live where they're supposed to because they've evacuated because of the threat from, in the North, 100,000 people, the threat from Hezbollah. And the question is Iran going to greenlight Hezbollah going at it with Israel? And if Israel gets wind of that, will Israel do something beforehand? But Israel's got a problem. They still got to finish off Hamas. That's a difficult operation. It's way, way more difficult, I think, than they anticipated. I think they're going to win. They're doing great. But, their soldiers are tired and they need more bodies. Let's just be honest with it. And so there's big talk, big political thing about do we reduce the exemptions for the Haredi from the draft, the ultra-Orthodox. Yeah. And so that's a political earthquake waiting to happen in Israel.
So it is very interesting. We are there next week, taking a tour group. We're one of the first tours going in, not the first tour, but one of them. And it's very safe in the areas we are going. As we look at Passover, it's coming up, I think April 22nd or somewhere around there. We're back by then, but it's an interesting dynamic because of the North. We are not going to Tel Dan, as you can imagine, right, because of everything that you just said. But we get extra time around Galilee, and we actually get to do things that I never get to do. I always ask one of our guides, David or whoever, hey, can we go over here? No, we're not going to be able to go over there. We don't have time. Well, I'd really like to go over there. Now, well, this time we get to go and do these things I've always wanted to do. So I'm excited about it, but the reality of it is, as we see everything developing, we know all of this is setting up for the last days. We look at the red heifers and and you mentioned the sacrifices. There's sacrifices that have been going on in places in Detroit in the Islamic communities and other places within the United States. Nobody ever says anything about those either, let alone Muslim countries. But here in the United States, it's happening. But it's already starting against the Jews. What you even mentioned. Why are they even talking about the red heifers? What is going to come out of the Christian community, I think, is going to be, there's going to be more pressure against Israel not to do it than there is even from the animal rights people.
By the way, I was in Ann Arbor recently in the last week, and I interviewed Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis 12.3 Project, Genesis 12.3 Foundation. And we were talking about he's got a new book out called Israel the Miracle. It's got a bunch of essays from Christians, because he's an Orthodox Jew, an essay book of Christians about the miracle of Israel. It's kind of interesting. If you go to his website, I think it's genesis123.co, I think they were selling it at Prophecy Watchers Conference last week, and enter Jonathan Kent. I'll put up the interview here in the next day or two. But he also had an article last week in Washington Times. What was the title of the article? The solution for peace in Gaza is Jesus.
That is amazing.
An Orthodox Jew said this.
That is amazing. So, go ahead.
So I think this ties back, though, to this first question we had about Zechariah 12 and looking on the one whom they're pierced. And my view is that and I think this is consistent with guys like Arnold Fruchtenbaum and Chuck Missler, that Hosea chapter 5, verse 15, and the first part of Hosea chapter 6 make the Jews, the return of Christ is conditioned on them calling out for a rescue.
All right.
The Jews.
Yeah.
Because of their redemption that takes place. And it takes place, I think, in this period leading up to the second coming during the days of awe. Feast of Trumpets to Day of Atonement is called the Days of Awe. And I think that has a whole lot of implications about the wrath and stuff that's being poured out. But they repent. When would they be more likely to repent? At the time of the Day of Atonement, right?
Right.
And they repent and they call on Jesus to come rescue them, and he returns and rescues them. But I think he goes first, which I think might be your next question, to Basra.
Yes, it is going to be my next question because Lori Saunders asked you. However, I have to comment on what you just said because that's the way I see it. And when I see and Olivier Melnick and I have had this conversation many times, and he's in full agreement with everything that you just said. When you look at the feast days of the Jews, you have the spring feasts were fulfilled in Jesus' first coming. I don't believe the fall feasts are connected with the rapture. I believe the fall feasts are connected with everything that you just said. And it's Christ coming back at the end of the tribulation period. It's the Feast of Trumpets, Days of Awe, Yom Kippur, and then the Feast of Sukkot. And then we have, Sukkot.
Putin's birthday.
On this last one. So this is it. And the Jews right now, so fascinating what you just said about his article in the New York Times. John, this happened. Washington Times. That makes more sense too, by the way. But when I was just there with Brandon in January, and I've already told people this that are going on the tour with me next week, is that what has happened since October 7, I have seen, when we were there, we witnessed Orthodox Jews. I'm not exaggerating, John. I probably already told you this. We witnessed Orthodox Jews. They came to us. We talked with them. They asked us if we would pray. They knew we were going to pray in Jesus' name. And I'm not kidding, John. We were even able to put our hand on some Jews, I'm not talking Haredi, but Orthodox, and pray for them and their families who are going through horrific things in the name of Jesus. I'm not saying they came to faith in Jesus yet, but what I see is exactly what you said. What is happening? They are being brought to that place, which, as you were talking, John, it just makes me think, man, we are so close that we really need to be ready, because the Jews right now, through this horrific war and all the anti-Semitism that's increasing, is they are starting to think maybe Jesus. And you can see it. You can see it in the mindset. I have never, ever, ever seen that in all my times in Israel.
By the way, this is something I was going to say something this week, because, we kind of argue. We don't argue. We talk about the timing of the rapture differences and everything. But one of the criticisms of the pre-wrath and post-trib community, of the pre-trib community, is that, well, you guys aren't that worried about evangelizing Jews and that type of thing. It's what's said. I mean, I know what's said because I sit there and I hear it. But I will tell you that with this, I'm very encouraged by what I see going on in the pre-trib community. Olivier Melnick, Shalom and Messiah, his new ministry. And he's going to be at our church next month in April. And Guillaume Springs and David Tao's organization.
Balagon Connection.
And what you have said with Guillaume Springs and taking body armor, I think maybe it was you or Brandon told me, body armor to Jewish soldiers. And some have come to faith in Messiah as a result of this. And Olivier and I talk a lot about this. And Olivier's point is we look at Matthew chapter 25, and and I've thought I was pre-trib at one point in my life, and I hope that's the way it works out, by the way. But Matthew 25, a lot of people have wanted, well, that's in the future. That's for some other group of saints to worry about caring for the persecuted Jews at that particular time. But what I see Olivier's doing is, well, and he told me this, and I don't think I'm misquoting him. Hey, if it's a good idea then, why isn't it a good idea now when this persecution of Jews is coming all over the world? Yeah. Why shouldn't we be taking them in and protecting them?
Well, I would say more on that, but you're right, and he does say that, and there's more. He's just asked me to keep my mouth shut for a while, so I will. But with I can
know
tell
what
you,
I can't say too much, but I just
Yeah.
know that that's his heart and soul is what is driving his new ministry.
and it's true. So and by the way, I haven't heard any pre-trib people, nobody I run with anyways, has said those things about the pre-wrath people don't care about evangelizing the Jews. It's probably, you probably heard it. I don't actually hear it, but
I'm saying it gets said. It's a lot of times I hear pre-trib people say things about pre-wrath that I've never heard anybody in the pre-wrath community say. So we kind of talk past each other, and I think it's time
that I can believe. I think we both sides can set up straw men. Okay,
well, we set up straw men, yeah.
Okay, with that, and this, Lori, we'll get to your question about Basra and Petra in just a second. But with what you just said, I look at this, and I just find all of this so fascinating. And as Olivier has said, right now we have an opportunity to do Matthew chapter 25, to minister to the Jews. Why are we not faithful? And that's a reason, and why it's doing all these different things to reach out to minister. As we see anti-Semitism increase here in the States, but online, I mean, you get hit with it, we get hit with it, both on your circles and mine. We are both blasted for our stand with Israel constantly. It's constantly monitoring the chat and realizing it is coming from everywhere. And that is part of us exercising Matthew 25 even now.
And that kind of raises up a thing I mentioned just briefly on Sunday. I mean, we go for hours and hours about this. But one of the Russian war doctrines that Putin says is we are going to protect ethnic Russians everywhere. So we have ethnic Russians in Ukraine. We'll invade Ukraine to protect them. There are ethnic Russians in a place called Transnistria in Moldova, and Putin's going to go in there. And a friend of mine, a pastor in Ukraine, sent me a picture of a Baptist evangelical lady and her baby who were killed by a missile strike by Russia on a Ukrainian apartment building in Odessa. There were many, many evangelical Christians killed in that attack. But think of this, Tom. If the Russian doctrine, as enunciated by Vladimir Putin, is to protect ethnic Russians in other countries, what country has, and in what part of that country is there a very large proportion, maybe the majority of Russians?
I know, yeah. No
it's
kidding.
Northern Israel, Nahariya, up in that area near the border there, Russia and Kara. And I'm just telling you, folks, you need to factor this in. And I'm a little bit I get a little bit exercised about a lot of my friends on the right that are Putin fanboys. This is not a good guy. He shut down the Jewish agency, so Jews can't get out of Russia to make Aliyah. But there are people in a neighboring country that are helping them. That is how Russian Jews are getting to Israel today. I know these people. So it's there's a much bigger picture that never gets talked about that plays into this end times thing, I think.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I think I'll ask you about that more next time, because as I look at the how many Russian Jews, from what I understand, per capita, there's more Russian Jews in Israel than any other ethnic group of Jews that are in Israel. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they're largely part of Avigdor Lieberman's party, Yisrael Beitenu. And he used to be part of the coalition with Netanyahu, but he hates him now, so he'll never be in a coalition. So
I would love to get on this subject, especially when we think of Ezekiel 38, Russia's invasion. How many Russian Jews are in Israel, especially northern Israel? Okay, real quick, couple of things, and then I have to get to Lori's question about Petra and Basra, because it's going to be fascinating with you, and we don't have a lot of time left, but we're going to do it. So somebody had asked if since our conference on the sea is sold out. That's the one with, as you know, it's with Bill Koenig, one of your friends. Jeff Kinley's joining us, and a couple of my other friends. That one, there's no more room left on it. We do have a Footsteps of Paul trip that's coming up. It's educational, everybody. That one is coming up. We're going to be in Athens. We're going to do Patmos. We're going to do Ephesus. It's coming up in September. If you want to join us, check out hopeforourtimes.com. I think it's about half full. I haven't talked about it, but I would love to have you join us. And it is educational. So it's going to be myself and Bob Probert. Bob is outstanding teacher and a lot of fun. So it's not going to be a prophecy cruise, except I'll be honest, I'll talk about some things, but it is going to be great. And we're going to do Corinth. And we have a couple of extensions also. You can check it out at the events page if you want to. We'd love to have you guys join us, but there is not a lot of room on that. So if you want to go, check it out. All right, Zach from Wretched Watchman is in the chat. Hi, Zach, and good to have you join us. Zach's program is on every other Friday. It's terrific. Below the Surface, it's great. You guys are going to love it. But with that, John, here's the question. It's from Lori Saunders on YouTube. Do you think Jordan will become a part of Israel in order for the Jews to go to Petra safely? So I think let's address that as part of your answer, because the whole concept, Jesus returning, we have Basra, all of this connection. Help
Who is this
everybody.
comes in, bloodstained robes from Basra. That's Isaiah chapter, was it 63?
Yeah, I think it's 63.
And I listen, Arnold Fruchter-Bob's book on Footsteps of the Messiah does a great job of treating that particular verse and incident. You know, I don't know. I'm not sure I've figured out how this Jordan, Edom, the greater part of Ammon, Moab, and Edom, which are the large portion of Jordan, which is excluded from the control of the Antichrist. Probably because it's a place where Israel, you remember in Matthew 24, says, when you see the abomination of desolation, flee to the mountains. And I think they will flee to the mountains in Jordan, in Basra, which includes Petra. And now what was the question again?
Do you think Israel or Jordan will become part
is Jordan going to be no longer an independent country? I'm telling you, Jordan is teetering on the brink. 80% of the country identify as Palestinians. They have refugee camps in Jordan. I've seen them that have existed since 1948. They still live in squalor in refugee camps, just like they did in Syria and Yarmouk and Damascus and in Lebanon. They still live in these refugee camps. They're horrible conditions. And so the king is always teetering on the brink. And I don't know what will happen. So, Tom, the water thing needs to be renewed. Mm-hmm. Okay. He is the supposed custodian of the Muslim holy places in Jerusalem. Will something be worked out as part of a renewal of this water agreement? Listen, you're not going to live much long in Jordan without water. Israel controls that. They're giving them twice as much as they have to. Is this going to be some part of a negotiation thing that they do? Like, okay, maybe you should cede control of the Temple Mount to, let's say, the coming king, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. Which, by the way, is saying that, we don't really think Islam has a religious claim to the Temple Mount. They may have a political claim. That's a different issue, but that's not where Muhammad did his night journey.
Okay, I can ask you a question and then come back to what you're saying?
Sure.
Do you think that will happen with MBS?
I'm just saying that the Abraham Accords are not dead. Okay. We also will have an intervening election this fall, which may change things. And if a certain guy who's now back on the ballot in all the states wins, those Abraham Accord, the push of those, the economic benefits mainly, may come about. And the understand when you get this to-nation thing, also know that the biggest component of the Abraham Accords is economic, which kind of fits in with this Revelation 13 thing as well, with the beast controlling buying and selling. I don't know. I'm not saying for sure that this is all connected, but I'm just saying we can't just dismiss it and gloss over it because we didn't read about it in a book published, 60 years ago. That's just the way I look at it. And I think that Jordan is teetering the brink. We know in Daniel 11, that around verse 35, these are excluded from the reach of this Antichrist. Edom, Moab, and the greater part of Ammon. So it seems like something happens to Jordan. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it is, but the Mohammed bin Salman had proposed a Hashemite kingdom of Palestine. Now that would include parts of the West Bank and Gaza, but I don't know that that's going to happen now. But that was a proposal that was floated almost 2 years ago now by people affiliated with Mohammed bin Salman.
Well, something's going to happen, John, because we know the attention is going to shift from Gaza to Jerusalem. And I mean, it's just fascinating.
Do you really think that Saudi Arabia will weep and cry if Hamas is crushed?
No, I think
they're reforming their Islam. And that's part of the problem is the Shia Turkey Muslim Brotherhood part of Islam. They've said all these years the Jews are like the lowest rung of humanity. And what's happened? They've watched as the Jews have come back as refugees from all over the world, poured nothing, and come and built this economic miracle in the Middle East. There's just no other way to describe it. And they can't deal with that. But others in the Sunni Arab South, which may be king of the north, king of the south in Daniel chapter 11, by the way, they're reforming their Islam because they're like, the Shia and the Muslim Brotherhood access in the north, they view it as an attack on their God. And the Saudis and others, United Arab Emirates, seem to be moving past that already. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm telling you, the most eye-opening thing to me out of everything you've said, and I have another question I have to ask you. It's about the destruction of Damascus. It's from Jeffrey Petrie because he's asking it. So I got to ask you that if you got another couple minutes to hang on. But the most interesting thing to me out of everything you've said and we've discussed is this talk about Jesus coming from Orthodox Jews that we've never heard before. And then you put in the Saudi Arabia conversation and all these different things. And it's just fascinating. Okay, we're going to get to Damascus. But
I have friends who have what I would call post-trib oriented ministries. Okay. So, and sometimes I hear some pre-trib, not at the leaders, but say, you post-trib, you don't care about Israel. You're into replacement theology. No. Some of the most ardent advocates of witnessing and evangelizing Jews are post-trib and pre-wrath ministries that I know. I'm just saying, and that's true. And so I know these guys in these post-trib ministries, messianic oriented, I guess you would call them, they go and hang out with the Orthodox rabbis in town. They're in dialogue. I met with a guy today in Columbus who mentioned our friend Roddy to me because he knows him. And it's like he's dialoguing with one of the biggest Orthodox rabbis in town in a Jewish section. So I'm just saying there's something going on this. And by the way, so when we talk about the temple and the pilgrimage road and the Pool Siloam and all of these things, everybody goes, oh, that's temple. The temple's terrible. Listen, folks, I think it's going to be rebuilt. The sacrifices are going to resume. I don't think they're salvation. But remember, in the Old Testament, up until the time of Jesus, all of those things were pointing to Jesus. Why don't we take them and point to Jesus?
Excellent point. That is excellent. That was so well said. And I think that's, I'm not interested in giving money to building of this temple,
right.
But using them to point to Jesus is what we should be doing because that is exactly what all of these things do. The red heifer, the temple that's coming, all of it, they point to Jesus. And ultimately, we do know that Israel will come to that place Well, they will look upon him whom they pierced.
By the way, if you can do it, go to the Temple Institute if you have time.
We are. Oh, we're going. We're actually going.
And you can take a picture. Take a picture of the Mizrach.
Okay.
Mizraq. It's a bowl. I use it as a picture of the bowls of wrath that are poured out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's got a handle, but it's got a pointed bottom because it could not be set down until the task that the bowl is designed to do, pouring out the blood, which I think is the pouring out the wrath in Revelation, until that's finished. It can't be set down.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to bring back a picture of it, maybe even video. So check this out. 2017, I went to the Temple Institute. It was just a film crew. And was a Chaim Rickman, I think is there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He let us go in. Nobody was there. We got to film inside, all over in there. And then we came out and somebody said they've never allowed anybody to go in and do that before. So I have all this film footage from there that I haven't used yet, but we are going. So I have not taken an official group into the Temple Institute in several years, but this time it's on the schedule. And
well, all of those elements, Tom, point to Jesus.
Well, that's the reason why I'm taking them, is because in the Temple Mount too, usually we go up to the Temple Mount, but this time we're actually going to go to Temple Institute. And the reason why is because of what you just said. All of this points to Jesus, just like the first temple and all of the Old Testament sacrifices. Even when Israel's disobedient and Jesus becomes the sacrificial lamb, they all still pointed to him, and they're all pointing to him coming back. Why would I not take advantage of this or just use these things and recognize them? I'm so glad you said it. You said it so well. I do have to get to Damascus, but I do got to point this out about the question with Petra or Basra. Just in context of what you just said, is the verses. So, and then we're going to move on to the final question about Damascus. And is that coming like now? Okay, is Isaiah 63, just as John said, this is what the Bible says, New King James Version. Who is this who comes from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? This one, this is the Lord, that's my commentary, this one who is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength, I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red and your garments like one who treads the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. Again, this is the Lord speaking. For I have trodden them in my anger and trampled them in my fury. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I have stained all my robes. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. That is speaking to Yeshua, Jesus coming back. And also, as we get to the last question, John, and you know this, there's Jewish believers that are post-trib, there's Jewish believers that are pre-wrath, and there's Jewish believers that are pre-trib when it comes to the timing of the rapture. And I don't know, the people I know, all of them are sharing their faith with Jews. And all of them are, in all three groups. So there's always people in every group that set up their straw man arguments, but I want to move on from that. But recognizing it for what you just said, Zechariah chapter 12, I wholeheartedly believe what you were saying. Bill Salas does, Olivier Melnick. Look, we need to be sharing Jesus with Israel, and I can't wait to go there next week. Okay, ready? I talked enough. Last question. You look like you were going to say one more thing.
No, I was just going to say is we need to use these elements just like they were used all the way through the Old Testament and in the New Testament and that type of thing. We need to follow, like example, Paul goes to Athens. He says, look, here's the unknown God. So Carl Tekrib, he goes to Burning Man and sets up a thing calls it the Camp of the Unknown God.
I didn't know that. I'm gonna have him on my program after I get back from Israel. That is cool. I did not know that.
I'm doing him tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Tell him I said hi.
With Mike Spalding. Yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead. We need to go to Damascus, and you got to get out.
Jeffrey Petrie, do you think Israel is going to have to destroy Damascus soon because of Iran's nuclear capabilities ramping up? Do you believe? Let me ask you this, John. Do you believe Damascus, Isaiah chapter 17, is still something that's going to be fulfilled?
I think it's still future.
Okay, I do too. So
I've heard the arguments from some of our friends, and I just don't think they're that good. And the problem with Jewish prophecy is pattern, and they repeat. So you'll have a near fulfillment and you'll have a far fulfillment that will be even more intense than the near one from when the prophets spoke. So, but it's very difficult. Like, is this one that's fulfilled a couple times, 3 times, and the final fulfillment? So listen, Israel's going to do something. In 2017, the head of the Israeli Air Force spoke at the Herzliya conference. I have a copy of the video. You can find it online. And he said, listen, we've got a problem in the north. Everybody thought the problem was in the north. They weren't anticipating. They missed the Gaza thing. But as Jonathan Spire said in my interview with him last week, the tunnel situation in southern Lebanon is worse than Gaza. Worse than Gaza, because they've been at it for 40 years, not 15. And it's a huge problem. It's going to be a huge problem. And so the question is, how does Israel goes to the people in Hezbollah and says, look, southern Lebanon, this is what the Israeli Air Force guy was implying back in 2017, southern Lebanon is going to look like Gaza when we get done with you. Do you want that? And I don't know, there's a lot of interaction with Damascus and Syria, and the Assad regime is pretty much hollowed out. It doesn't really control a lot, but it does control major areas of Damascus, which look pretty normal. They've been exempted from the war because they weren't Sunni Arab neighborhoods that Russia and Syrian army and air force bombed to rubble. Look at Aleppo. Look at Syrian Sunni neighborhoods in Damascus. They're destroyed. And the question is, will Israel do that as part of shock and awe? Because there's something else that we don't know about that's being harbored there in Damascus. And I think that's a very, very strong possibility that will be part of this northern problem to deal with the issue in the north.
Right. I look at, yeah, I don't think it's in the too distant future myself. I believe it's a future prophecy. And I literally wake up some mornings thinking this could be the day that Damascus is eliminated.
So, Tom, our government is talking about cutting off arms and things to replenish Iron Dome and stuff to Israel. So Israel has to decide, do we hedge our bets and wait till the election in the fall and hope that the Republicans might get enough control to rearm us, or do we do it now while we still have the stuff?
Yeah, and will it even happen, the election in the fall? So Israel, listen, Israel is being pushed into a place of having no friend that can help them, I should say. And like the U.S., and I'm watching what's going on with the U.S., and they're totally anti-Israel. So will Israel have to take serious matters into their own hands and really increase the damage that they're going to do just for their own survival? It appears to me like there's a very, very, very good chance that, yes, they're going to have to.
Well, I just saw Kamala Harris go over there and tell everybody in the world that it's a humanitarian disaster in Gaza. I get that, okay? We don't like to see that. But how about Kamala and Joe Biden and Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan? Maybe the first thing you should say is Hamas surrender unconditionally and free all the hostages. Yeah. Then we'll stop. But nobody ever says that. It's insanity.
Neither do they ever talk about the hundreds of thousands of people that have been slaughtered in Syria alone, or other millions by other Islamic regimes against their own Islamic people. They don't say anything about any of those things. Don't talk about
I was 20 miles away in Israel, the Sea of Galilee, 30 miles away from Dagra when the Syrian civil war started in March 2011. And Syria's population today is 1/2 of what it was. It was 23 million then. It's under 10 million now. And there's not a single protester at Harvard or Cal Berkeley or UCLA that's marched for a dead Syrian. No. It's hypocrisy on an epic scale.
And they won't talk about the deaths at the U.S. hands of in Iraq or other places too. They won't talk about any of those things. It's just,
right.
It's a very strange thing that's worth giving thought to for people who are anti-Israel. Why does this only happen to the Jew? Why does it only happen to Israel when it comes to this type of spin that comes? And also, why is it that they're only demanding that Israel mourn the loss of Palestinians. Nobody's demanding that Hamas or Palestinians mourn the loss of Jews. Well, that's an interesting thought. Why is that?
Even the UN today came out and confirmed, but two good news things today is the UN came out and confirmed that there were incidents of rape, that contrary to the narrative from the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian people, and Michelle Obama says she's not going to run for president.
She did say Michael Obama's not running. Wow. Well, there we go. Okay. Hey, John, we better get going. I'm going to send you pictures from Israel, and I'm also going to try and see if I can do something short with you while I'm in Israel with Roddy, or maybe even from the Temple Institute. If they let me film in the Temple Institute, that would be cool if I could do it with you. So either way, we'll pull off something. I don't know how, I don't know when, but we will do it. So be ready, everybody.
Thanks,
next week.
Tom. Really great to talk to you.
All right. Great. Always great talking to you, John. See you soon. And tell Carl hi for me. All right.
Okay.
Shalom, everyone. Oh, Zach's joining me today in the afternoon. Bye.